Can you understand the world without understanding yourself, without who you are, without your internal understanding? Because you see the world through your own eyes. You cannot see the world through somebody else's eyes. You can only see and feel the world through your subjective experience. And how accurate is your subjective experience? And how accurately your subjective experience reflect objective reality? And why we think about good and evil, and why we take good and evil for granted. And it's funny, if you go online and look, for example, at the same video, like if you, for example, take several people who look at the same video of some violent crime, you'll see different comments under this video. People perceive this video differently. They have different reaction to this video. This was scary because if you have people who lives in the same country have absolutely opposite idea of good and evil, they have absolute idea of morality, it's getting a little bit tricky because how you can reconcile differences between these people. And if you read their comments, you can perceive how they view the world. For example, there's people who view the world through theology, there's people who view the world through being atheist, the other people who view the world through political and racial tribalism, there's other people who view the world through different cultural differences. We have a lot of differences. That's why theology as a base, as the foundation for every country, is incredibly important. We cannot reject theology. We cannot create the country that basic on atheism, basic on completely on science, because we still have this need, the spiritual need in God. And the older you are, the more you understand this need, because you need to have sacrifices of your own body. Because if you don't do sacrifices of your own body, by limit your body, by limit the urges that your body constantly craves, you become incredibly miserable. But once you learn to control your body, to control your urges, you become stronger and your life become much more meaningful. But it's only possible if you understand why you're doing this. And atheistic lifestyle doesn't give you this notion. It only comes for some reason from theology. Because if you look at atheists, some of them incredibly intelligent, some of them incredibly reasonable, but they still worship something. Even if you have faith in zero, you still worship zero. And what it does, you can imagine as a zero is something like a mirror where you worship yourself, your own body. That's what atheism does. They worship their own bodies because they believe there are bodies. In some sense we are, but you have to have this high goal, this high value, and you have to believe in something that better than you are, something that much more important than you are. For example, if you're an atheist and you don't have kids, what do you believe is more important than you are? What? Because if you don't believe in God, if you don't have no notion of God, you believe that you are the end of your own world. And you don't want to sacrifice yourself, even sacrifice your bodily urges, because if you are your body, there's nothing else, why not to satisfy your body constantly? Why not to just follow all your primitive instinct and get great dopamine boost every once in a while? Why not to eat this piece of cake? Why not to sleep around? Why not to play video games for 20 hours a day if you have opportunity? That's the problem. Why do you need to restrict yourself? Why need to become a man or a woman? Why take responsibility for your gender? Why take responsibility for being a man? Why to take responsibility for being a woman? Because you don't care. So what's the point? You just enjoy your life. You just go, just take pleasures the way you can. And that's the problem. You start dissipating yourself inside the pleasures. And I was thinking about good and evil, because there's no good and evil. They're not self-evident. We constantly change the idea of good and evil. And if somebody who's incredibly reasonable, incredibly well-spoken, he or she can easily convince you that good is not good and evil is not evil. It depends on their reasoning. And that's what the danger is. And if we don't have this moral foundation, if we don't have this theological foundation that we agreed upon, because what is the religion? What is the theology? It's experiment that works. We've been worshiping God for millennia, for thousands of years. And it works. It always worked because society who believe in God live much better, much more prosperous life. Because let's assume, for example, from atheist perspective that there's no God. Let's assume about religion. We have some need for religion. And this explanation that atheists try to give people that somehow religious people are stupid or it's stupid to believe in God, it's kind of obnoxious. And I don't think it's true. What happened is, okay, let's assume there's no God. But if you look at the religion evolvement, right, you see there's certain benefits out of it because people who believe in God, they more restrain themselves, their family much more stronger, they have much more mental capacity to overcome certain issues. And prayer is incredibly helpful. When you pray, you feel better. And also when you know and you have such an meaningful idea of a sacrifice, your life becomes much, much better because you accept such an amount of suffering into your life voluntarily. And you know it's normal. Because when you become absolutely hedonistic, when you believe that you have to be happy all the time, you treat suffering as your enemy. As suffering is not your enemy. Suffering gives you such a signal what must be improved and what must be handled. And once you learn this, your life become better because your life will always suffer. You always suffer. You will suffer more, you will suffer less, but suffering is a part of our life. And what theology does, it gives you such a meaning in your own suffering. And what hedonism does, what atheism does, it doesn't explain why you suffer. It just gives you medication. It just gives you another low-level pleasures that you try to drown your suffering in. While idea of God, while idea of religion gives you this notion that you suffer for a reason. And you have to handle the suffering with the decency of a man or with the decency of a woman. And you don't have to numb yourself with another bodily addictions. You have to accept your suffering and you have to overcome your suffering through patience, through silence. That's, I think, a very noble idea to have. Otherwise, if you're an atheist, how are you supposed to understand your own suffering? You go on depression, you got therapists, you got a bunch of medication, you drown yourself in alcohol and sex and everything and video games. It's like you have no restriction because our life, I think the quality of our life, you can understand through how much restriction you voluntarily oppose on yourself. You have to have such an discipline. Discipline is the most important thing, and it's again come from theology because you have to take responsibility for being a man. You have to take responsibility for being a woman. We are biological creatures, but also we have self-awareness. We have consciousness. We can understand much more things than just being biological creatures. And even if you just assume that you are only a biological creature, like if you are atheist, and a lot of atheists, they have make this assumption we're just biological creatures and we're going to die, nothing happened, nothing is important. They're almost close to nihilism, almost close to nihilist. But okay, even assume it's so, right? You still have a lot of restraint. You have to self-impose a lot of restraint on your biology because your biology always dragging you toward something not good. We always crave something bad. You always crave something more and more and more and more. It's really hard to stop. And you can compare your body with a Luciferian idea while your mind with the God, with the light. Because if you look at your body, like take an example of Lucifer. Lucifer is a light, what is this? Light carrier. It's something connected to light. And what happened to Lucifer? He became so obnoxious that he believed that he can be as good as God. And God punished him by throwing him to hell. That's what happened to our body. Sometimes our body goes out of control and it believes that you don't need mind, you don't need self-awareness, you don't need nothing. You can actually enjoy sex with a bunch of women. You can eat as much food as you want. You can just don't do exercises and just relax, chill, and enjoy your life. Drink and be merry, because tomorrow you might die. And what happens is, you get out of shape, you age faster, and you become incredibly miserable, bitter, full of resentful. Because you have to be careful. We all age. We all age, and we age pretty quickly, but there's meaningful aging and there's horrible aging. Like, I always thought that some people age like wine, and it's really hard to age like wine, but most of the people age like potatoes. And that's the problem. And that's what, when you start discovering this idea of God within yourself, you start understanding, maybe I should be careful in my perception of reality. Maybe I should be a little bit careful with my subjective experience, because you never know. And it's not about afterlife. It's not even, I don't think about afterlife. I think about this life. I want to try to find this connection between my biology and my mind, my body and my consciousness, because it's all a constant struggle. I always have to constantly have to control my body. It's really hard to do. I mean, everybody can relate to that. It's hard to control your own body, your own bodily urges. But you have to do this, because once you control it, you start becoming more successful for yourself. You mentally feel better, and you physically feel better. And coming back to, for example, your body, you can compare like a Lucifer that's constantly obnoxious, that constantly wants something bad, and your mind kind of connected to God, to something that can transcend your body. And once you establish this connection, you start controlling your body. You start you start imposing voluntarily restraint upon your body, because you don't want to get fat, you don't want to get out of shape, you don't want to have promiscuous lifestyle. You want to dedicate your time to learn something. You want to dedicate your time to read more books. You want to dedicate your time to create something meaningful out of your life, because your life, it's your own creation. And that's another thing, because when you read the Bible, right, God created the world, and God created you, and you're the one who created the world as well, because you're creating your own subjective experience, and you can see your subjective experience is your own creation. And you create something meaningful out of your own subjective experience. People who say that life is meaningless, they actually too lazy to try to understand that they are creators of their own universe. They are creators of their own stories. Nobody's going to create story for you. What you can do, you can become, I don't know, maybe some extra in someone else's story, but you're the one who's supposed to look for the meaning inside your own story, and your story must be your own creation. There's no other ways around. That's what you start understanding. But to be able to do so, you have to subjugate your biology. You have to control your biology. You have to control your biological urges, because it seems like it was created to distract you from something that's really meaningful, from the meaning of life. Because your body just dragging you on a primitive level, just survive and procreate. And if you go on this path, just survival and procreation, and you're never thinking about something meaningful, you're still going to feel this strange sadness, this depression, this tragedy within yourself like everybody else. But the point is, we all suffer one way or another. We're all going to feel bad and miserable and depressed, and we always feel this way. The point is, religion teaches you how to find meaning in your own suffering. Since you already have this suffering within you, why don't you want to find some meaning in this suffering? Why don't you want to carry this cross proudly upon your shoulders? And know the more weight you carry, the better your life is. The more suffering you have, the more deeper you are, the more pain you can manage, the more actually you can achieve. Because everything is parallel. Everything makes so much sense if you look at this from a different perspective. And once you once you learn about sacrifice, that you can sacrifice. For example, I truly believe, this idea came to me by accident, that your body is your main sacrifice. And you sacrifice your body every single day, because every day you die a little, every day. And you have to die with dignity every day. You shouldn't give up on yourself. You're sacrificing your body meaningfully. You're sacrificing your body reasonably. You know that you have to sacrifice it, because every day you die a little. Every day. some part of you dies, and some part of you born again. And every day you follow this idea of sacrificing your body. And how you do this? You're sacrificing your body by opposing restriction on it, by not letting it to become out of shape, but by helping it to become the great vessel of the idea of you. Yes, you have to help your body become a dignified vessel of the idea of you, what makes you you. You have to treat your body almost as a temple where magic happens. And once you think yourself this way, but I'm not saying to be obsessed with the body, not at all. I'm saying that you have to restrict your body. You have to create such voluntarily chains around your body to give your mind some more stable existence inside of the world you keep creating constantly. You are your body and you are your mind, and what you have to learn to become more mind than your body by controlling your body with your mind.